The world spun into a blur of chandeliers and hushed conversations. But for Major General Arthur Vance, 37 years old and globally recognized for cybersecurity, the only true battlefield was the reflection in this opulent hotel mirror. He saw not a decorated officer, but a man in a discreet dark suit, grappling with a decade of emotional distance and the lingering question of what family connection truly felt like. My name is Arthur Vance, and my profession demands discretion, not disclosure. Yet, if compelled to summarize, I'd recount my journey. Graduating at the top of my class from the Citadel Military College, securing a master's in cybersecurity from Stanford University, and being conferred an honorary doctorate by Caltech. I have orchestrated international cyber missions like Operation Aegis Shield, established the elite Chimera Task Force, provided testimony to Congress on matters of critical national security, and received recognition from NATO for contributions that must forever remain in the shadows, actions taken in darkness to safeguard the light. Currently, I hold the pivotal position of Director of Cyber Strategy, Integration, and Defense Relations at the U.S. Army Cyber Command. In simpler terms, I am the individual spearheading the nation's military cybersecurity efforts, managing defense contracts valued in the billions. Yet, no one in my family is aware of this. Today, I return not as a general, but simply as Art, the eldest son, the older brother, the one my family perceives as a mere soldier. I stood before the five-star majestic Crest Hotel, its facade gleaming like a polished jewel under the late afternoon sun, while my younger brother, Ethan, was about to celebrate his wedding. The edifice itself was a testament to grandeur, with gleaming ivory marble columns that soared skyward, dazzling crystal fixtures casting prismatic light, and a plush crimson carpet that flowed from the main entrance to the cavernous banquet hall within. The gentle, sophisticated melody of a live jazz quartet drifted from inside, a harmonious blend with the elegant laughter and murmuring conversations of distinguished guests already assembled. I took a slow, deep breath, the cool air momentarily steadying the quiet tremor in my chest. I straightened my tie, feeling the cool, familiar metal of my Citadel ring pressing against my finger, a constant reminder of the vow I had made to my mother. I would not miss Ethan's significant day, despite it being almost a decade since I last set foot in our family home. A decade since I had deliberately forged my own arduous path, leaving behind my family's world of opulent glamour and high finance to inhabit sterile military installations, endure the chilling air of secure server rooms, and confront unseen, relentless digital adversaries through endless, sleepless nights. My family, the Vances, were far from ordinary. My father, Harrison Vance, was the formidable CEO of Apex Innovations, a sprawling technology conglomerate whose influence permeated the defense, healthcare, and financial sectors. He was a tall man, perpetually clad in custom-tailored suits, his distinguished salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed, projecting an air of effortless command that had intimidated me since childhood. My mother, Eleanor, was a woman of gentle demeanor but razor-sharp intellect, a quiet force who served as my father's most trusted advisor, her soft-spoken words often carrying more weight than any of his booming pronouncements. And then there was Ethan, my younger brother, the company's brilliant CFO, a younger, more charismatic reflection of our father. Intelligent, ruthlessly ambitious, and possessing a natural, almost magnetic ability to captivate any audience he encountered. They were titans in the public eye, the masterminds behind a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that shaped industries and influenced markets. And I was the sole member who had unequivocally declined the invitation to join the family business, spurning a life of inherited wealth and public acclaim for a life of quiet sacrifice and profound purpose that they would never truly comprehend. I entered the main banquet hall, a vast, echoing space where over 300 guests were already assembled, their laughter and conversations a lively hum. The atmosphere was thick with the rich aroma of expensive fragrances and gourmet cuisine, punctuated by the delicate chime of crystal wine glasses and the dazzling sparkle of formal attire under the brilliant, strategically placed lights. A young woman in a crisp hotel uniform approached, her tablet in hand, and with a polite smile, verified my invitation. She then directed me to table 17, situated in a remote, almost forgotten corner of a sprawling room, tucked away behind a towering floral arrangement. I offered her a polite smile and a word of thanks, but a familiar, dull ache settled deep in my chest. Table 17. Not at the main table reserved for family, not near the opulent stage where the Van Cess would hold court, but a peripheral table designated for guests of little importance, for those who simply had to be invited but were not truly part of the inner circle. It was not a surprise, not truly. It felt like a small, sharp wound to the heart, a familiar reaffirmation of my estranged status. As I navigated my way through the throng of elegantly dressed guests, several people glanced in my direction. A distant cousin I barely recognized, an old family acquaintance from childhood who offered a faint, almost pitying smile, and numerous unfamiliar faces whose expressions held a blend of curiosity and outright pity. "That's Art, the eldest Vance son." I overheard a woman in a shimmering gown murmur conspiratorially to her friend, her voice carrying clearly over the gentle din. "They say he's still in military. Such a waste of a brilliant intellect. He could have achieved so much more at Apex, been a billionaire by now." I feigned ignorance, my jaw clenching almost imperceptibly, and pulled out a chair at table 17, taking my seat with a practiced nonchalance. The other guests at the table, immersed in spirited conversations about stock portfolios, luxury real estate investments, and the latest tech acquisitions, barely registered my arrival. They gave me a perfunctory, polite smile before quickly returning to their discussions, as if my presence was of no consequence whatsoever, a mere shadow, flitting at the periphery of their glittering world. My gaze drifted toward the grand stage at the front of the hall, where Ethan stood, resplendent and undeniably handsome in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his hand gently clasped in that of his radiant bride, Sophia. She was stunning, truly, with luminous blonde hair that cascaded over her shoulders and a smile that radiated pure joy. Ethan laughed heartily at a remark from our father, who stood proudly beside them, raising a toast with a crystal glass of champagne. The entire room seemed to orbit around them. The Van Cess, the successful, the revered, the embodiment of wealth and power. I took a slow sip of water, a subtle bitterness on my tongue that had nothing to do with the cool liquid, but rather stemmed from the heavy weight of resurfacing memories. Growing up in our sprawling home in suburban Connecticut, with its vast, perfectly manicured lawn and a shimmering blue swimming pool that beckoned on hot summer days, Ethan and I had been inseparable. We shared secrets, built elaborate forts, and dreamt of futures together. Our father, Harrison, had consistently lectured us on the paramount importance of integrity, on living a life that would bring honor to the Vance name. You must always do what is right, regardless of the difficulty or personal cost, he would state at dinner, his gaze both stern and deeply affectionate, his words etched into my young mind. I had taken his words to heart, embracing those values with the earnestness of a dutiful son. So, when I came of age, after rigorous self-reflection, I chose the citadel, chose the military, chose a path I genuinely believed would make him proud, a path of service and duty. I was profoundly mistaken. When I finally gathered the courage to share my decision to enlist, my father had regarded me as if I had committed an act of profound betrayal, as if I had willfully soiled the family name. The military, he had said, his voice dangerously low, stripped of all affection. You want to waste your life in barracks, earning a pittance, enduring hardship, when you could have a corner office with a panoramic view of the Hudson River, a seven-figure salary, and a legacy to build? Ethan, only 18 at the time, stood behind him, smirking a dismissive shrug of his shoulders. If you want to play the hero, Art, go for it, he had said, his tone a disquieting mix of jest and earnest condescension. From that day forward, the chasm between my family and me had widened into an abyss. I dedicated myself completely to my work, from the arduous, unforgiving training at the Citadel, where every fiber of my being was tested, to the sleepless nights spent programming and analyzing encrypted data in secure server rooms at the command center, battling unseen threats. I ascended the ranks with relentless determination, from captain to major, then colonel, and ultimately, at the remarkably young age of 36, to major general, one of the youngest officers in the U.S. Armed Forces to achieve that formidable rank. I commanded Operation Aegis Shield, a complex and critical mission that successfully countered a sophisticated cyber attack from a hostile state, protecting millions of sensitive data records and preventing a potential national catastrophe. I established the Chimera Task Force, an elite unit comprised of the brightest minds and most skilled operators, specifically designed to address rapidly evolving global cyber threats. I have stood before Congress, fielding difficult, often accusatory questions on matters of national security, my testimony shaping policy and influencing billions in defense spending. I accepted a medal from NATO in a solemn ceremony overseas, a moment of profound personal pride that I had desperately hoped my family would attend. They did not. I sent numerous emails and formal invitations, extending every opportunity for them to witness my achievements, but they were met with an impenetrable wall of silence. No responses, no congratulations. My mother would call periodically, her voice laced with subtle pressure, asking, "When are you coming to work for the company, Artie? Your father could really use your brains." My father was more direct, his words cutting like a surgeon's scalpel. "When you're finished playing soldier, just inform me. I'll find something suitable for you." I surveyed the grand banquet hall once more, where everyone was now applauding rapturously as Ethan and Sophia, their faces radiant with joy, sliced their towering wedding cake, their smiles illuminated by the rapid succession of camera flashes. I managed a polite smile, but a storm, cold and churning, raged within me. I was not angry with my family. I had long grown accustomed to their profound misunderstanding, their inability to see beyond their own definitions of success. But I could not deny the pain, a small but profound cut that reopened every single time I heard myself described as the lowly soldier or the Vance family's poorest decision. I wondered, with a deep, pervasive ache, if they ever entertained the slightest thought that I chose this life not from naivety, not from a lack of options, but from a fierce, unshakable conviction that I did not require inherited wealth or fleeting fame to feel that my life had profound meaning. Suddenly, a middle-aged man in a crisply pressed colonel's uniform approached my table, his stride purposeful. I recognized him immediately. Colonel David Shaw, a former colleague and a trusted member of the Chimera Task Force. He stood at rigid attention, saluting me with unmistakable, profound respect, a gesture that immediately drew attention. "Major General Vance, it is an honor to see you here, sir," he said, his voice clear and resonant enough to carry distinctly over the general din of the room. A few heads at the adjacent tables turned sharply in my direction, their curiosity visibly piqued. I stood, extended my hand, and shook as firmly, a faint smile touching my lips. "David, it's been some time. Keeping well, I hope?" I asked, my tone casual, attempting to deflect the unexpected attention. He nodded, his eyes still conveying a deep, unwavering admiration. "As fit as ever, sir. And you? I heard you concluded a significant, sensitive project with NATO just last month." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Today, I'm just a guest, David. No work, just family." As David departed, casting one last respectful glance over his shoulder, I sat back down, feeling the palpable shift in the gazes from the adjacent tables. A woman, likely a longtime friend of my mother, leaned close to her companion, whispering conspiratorially, "Major General? That must be an error. Art, a general? Impossible." He's always been the quiet one, the one who didn't quite fit. I did not react, simply taking another slow sip of water, the cool liquid a small, transient comfort. I had no need to explain myself, no desire to justify my life choices in a room filled with people who had already judged me. In exactly 1 week, at the formidable headquarters of Apex Innovations, I would meet my father and Ethan in a setting they did not anticipate, a context that would shatter their preconceived notions. On that day, words would be utterly unnecessary. My Major General's dress uniform and the immense authority it represented would say everything for me. The wedding celebration continued late into the night with rounds of passionate dancing, heartfelt speeches, and endless toasts. I remained seated in quiet observation, a silent sentinel in a corner. My father took the stage once more, raising his glass high and speaking of Ethan with undisguised pride, his voice booming with satisfaction. "My son, Ethan, a man of exceptional talent and vision, has propelled Apex Innovations to unprecedented heights," he announced, his voice echoing through the grand hall, drawing effusive applause. "Thank you all for joining us on this momentous day, for celebrating the union of two remarkable young people and the continued success of the Vance legacy." The guests erupted in another wave of applause. I clapped along as well, but inwardly a cold thought settled. If he knew who I truly was, if he truly understood my accomplishments, would he ever mention me in such a public forum? Would he acknowledge my existence? My father went on, elaborating on his own unparalleled success and his boundless pride in Ethan. Unable to endure this subtle torment any longer, I quietly stood and made my way to a discreet balcony overlooking the city. The city sprawled out before me, an incandescent tapestry of lights glittering like an infinite field of artificial stars, stretching to the horizon. I inhaled the cool night air deeply, the gentle breeze calming the tumultuous thoughts swirling within my mind. I was not here to prove a point, not tonight. I was here solely to honor the promise I had made to my mother, because despite everything, despite the years of misunderstanding and dismissal, I still loved my family, even if they perpetually failed to understand me. But I knew, deep down, that today was merely a prelude, a quiet, tense overture to a much larger drama. In 1 week, at that Apex Innovations meeting, everything would be irrevocably different. I would not raise my voice or cast blame. I would simply allow the truth to reveal itself, stark and undeniable. I took out my phone and opened an old email, the invitation I had sent my parents for my NATO medal ceremony 3 years prior. It was a formal, yet heartfelt, invitation complete with dates, times, and travel arrangements. No reply. A sad, resigned smile touched my lips as I turned off the screen and stepped back inside, ready to face the remainder of the night. The night was far from over, and I was prepared to face it, just as I had faced every other formidable challenge in my life, alone and unyielding. Ethan's wedding celebration lasted late into the night, but I did not remain until the very end. As the glittering lights of the chandeliers in the majestic Crest Grand Ballroom began to dim, casting long, soft shadows, and the final glasses of champagne and wine were being served, I made a quiet, unobtrusive exit. The faint melody of the jazz quartet still resonated behind me, mingling with the lingering laughter and conversation of the elite guests. But I was eager, almost desperate, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of feigned cordiality and unacknowledged pain. Stepping outside, my breath formed a delicate cloud in the cool, crisp night air. The city was still a breathtaking spectacle of shimmering lights, but despite its vibrancy, I felt a profound, aching emptiness. Not anger, not anymore, but a simmering sorrow, like an old wound that had been disturbed and reopened. I'm not truly angry with my family. I have, over time, come to accept that they fundamentally do not understand me or the life I've chosen, that they view the world through a vastly different lens. What stings, what truly hurts, is their pervasive perception of me as a failure, a 37-year-old man still somehow adrift in the military, marking time while my father and brother reign supreme as titans of industry, masterminds of a billion-dollar empire. They refer to me, often in casual, dismissive tones, as the lowly soldier, as if for the past decade I have done nothing more than polish boots in a sterile barracks, awaiting a meager paycheck. They are utterly unaware that I am a major general, one of the youngest in the U.S. Army. They do not know that I possess the immense authority to approve or deny the very defense contracts their corporation so desperately seeks, contract worth billions that could secure their legacy for generations. And I will not enlighten them. Not yet. I hailed a taxi back to my parents' sprawling estate, where I would be staying for a few days before returning to my official duties at Cyber Command. The house, situated in the most exclusive part of the suburbs, was a true mansion, a testament to their accumulated wealth, with ornate wrought iron gates, meticulously manicured lawns that stretched seemingly forever, and a swimming pool that shimmered invitingly under the pale moonlight. As a child, before Apex Innovations became the behemoth it was, we had lived in a more humble, though still comfortable home. But after the company achieved massive, almost unbelievable success, my parents acquired this property as a definitive symbol of their achievements, their power, their ascent. I let myself in, the click of the lock echoing faintly in the vast silence of the foyer, my footsteps echoing on the polished marble floors. The housekeeper, Maria, a kind woman who had been with our family for decades, greeted me with a genuine, heartwarming smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Art, it's been too long," she said, her voice filled with warmth and sincere affection. I smiled and thanked her, a small, sad thought forming in my mind. Her welcome might very well be the only truly sincere one I would receive during my visit here. The living room was immense, with soaring ceilings that seemed to touch the sky and walls adorned with expensive, museum-quality art. I paused, taking it all in. On an ebony shelf, amidst a collection of ornate picture frames, rested a visual chronicle of my family's perceived success. My father and Ethan at a technology summit, Ethan proudly receiving his MBA from Wharton, my father on the prestigious cover of Fortune magazine with the bold headline Architect of Tomorrow. There was no sign of me, not one photograph, not one medal, not a single trace of Arthur Vance, the eldest son who chose a military career over a corporate one. I had once sent my mother a photo from my promotion ceremony to Major, a proud image of me in my uniform before the American flag, shaking hands with a high-ranking NATO general. She never displayed it. Perhaps, I thought with a pang, she felt it simply clashed with the house's meticulously curated decor. I walked slowly to a quieter corner of the room where an old, lightly dusted photograph sat on a small side table. It was our family when I was about 10 and Ethan was 6. My father's arm was affectionately around my shoulders. My mother held Ethan's hand, and all four of us were smiling brightly in a sun-dappled park. I touched the cold glass of the frame, a flood of memories returning with poignant clarity. Back then, my father would speak to me about integrity, about doing what was right even when the world disagreed. When it was difficult, "Art, you must be a man who stands tall," he would say, his eyes shining with paternal pride. I believed him implicitly and lived by those principles. But now, he was the one who looked at me as if I were a profound disappointment. I heard soft footsteps approaching. My mother entered, dressed in a flowing silk robe, her silver hair catching the ambient light. "Artie, you're back early from the wedding?" she asked, her voice gentle yet strained, carrying an undercurrent of unspoken tension. I nodded and offered her a small, tired smile. "Yes, Mom. The wedding was lovely, but I felt a bit tired." She stepped forward as if to embrace me, her arms lifting slightly, then hesitated, her gaze darting away, and changed the subject. "Ethan was magnificent, wasn't he? And Sophia is such a charming girl. They will be very happy together, I'm sure." I nodded, but a quiet, bitter question formed in my mind. Did she ever consider my happiness? I went upstairs to my old room, a spacious bedroom with a large, comfortable bed and windows that overlooked the shimmering pool. I sat down, opened my suitcase, and took out a classified dossier marked Project Orion. This was the immense defense contract Apex Innovations was currently pursuing, the very project I would be overseeing. I reviewed it meticulously, made a few precise notes, and then secured it away, out of sight. In a week, I would meet my father and Ethan at their corporate headquarters, not as a son or brother seeking approval, but as Major General Arthur Vance, the man who held the fate of this multi-billion-dollar project firmly in his hands. I did not want to dwell on it now. I just wanted to sleep, to escape the lingering, condescending looks from the wedding guests, to find a moment of peace. The following morning, I woke early for a customary jog around the vast, verdant gardens of the estate. The air was crisp and invigorating, but my mind was still unsettled, churning with the events of the previous day and the upcoming confrontation. When I returned to the house, I found my father already seated at the expansive dining table, absorbed in a financial journal, a cup of steaming coffee beside him. He glanced up, offering a curt nod. "Art, sit, have some breakfast." I pulled out a chair opposite him, the subtle, scraping sound loud in the quiet room. My mother entered shortly after, carrying a plate of perfectly cooked eggs and toast, her smile warm but her presence silent, almost watchful. The atmosphere at the breakfast table was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional clink of silverware against china. "What were your thoughts on the wedding?" my father asked, his eyes still fixed on the financial paper, seemingly uninterested in my response. "It was beautiful," I replied, my voice even. Ethan seemed very happy. He nodded slowly, folded the journal with a decisive snap, and finally met my gaze, his eyes sharp and assessing. "And you? Still with the military?" His voice held a faint trace of reluctance, as if he were unsure he truly wanted to know the answer, or perhaps dreaded it. I gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes, still there." I offered no further details, no mention of my rank, No stories of NATO operations, no accounts of the countless sleepless nights spent thwarting cyber attacks that could cripple national infrastructure. I knew, with a weary certainty, that he would not be interested. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then spoke, his tone calm but cutting, each word a deliberate wound. You know, Art, sometimes I truly wonder what you are doing with your life. Ethan has achieved so much, building a legacy, earning a six-figure monthly salary. And you're still there in the barracks, living a life I frankly cannot comprehend. I gripped my fork, a surge of raw anger rising within me, hot and swift, but I suppressed it, tightly reining in my emotions. I enjoy my work. I stated evenly, my voice betraying no emotion. He scoffed, shaking his head dismissively. Work? That isn't work, Art. It's a pastime, a hobby. One day, you will understand what real responsibility entails, what it truly means to build something. When you do, let me know. I'll find a suitable position for you at the company. I didn't respond. I just looked at him, the man who once taught me about integrity, about standing for what was right, now dismissing my entire life's dedication as a trivial joke. My mother sat beside us, silent, her gaze shifting anxiously between my father and me, a silent plea in her eyes. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. Harrison, that's enough. Art has his own path, his own purpose. But my father waved her off, a dismissive flick of his wrist. Eleanor, you don't get it. Art has potential, immense potential, but he's squandering it. He isn't like Ethan. Ethan understands how the world works. Those words struck me like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp pain. I stood up politely, pushing my chair back. I'm full. Thank you, Mom. I left the table, feeling the burning intensity of my father's stare on my back. I did not turn around. I did not want him to see the sting in my eyes, the quiet devastation his words had wrought. That afternoon, compelled by a faint hope of rekindling something, anything, of our past bond, I paid a visit to Ethan at his downtown office. I wanted to congratulate him properly, to try and find some remnant of the brotherhood we once shared. His office was on the 40th floor of a shimmering glass tower, offering a panoramic, breathtaking view of the entire city skyline, a symbol of his soaring success. He sat behind a large, minimalist desk in a pristine gray suit, intensely analyzing a complex financial chart on his dual monitors. When he saw me enter, he stood with a practiced, polite smile. Art, didn't expect to see you, he said, shaking my hand. The gesture felt formal, almost cold, like one exchange between distant business associates, devoid of any fraternal warmth. Congratulations, I said, taking a seat in the sleek leather chair opposite his desk. The wedding was spectacular. Ethan grinned, leaning back in his chair with an air of satisfaction. Thanks. Sophia and I spent a year planning it. Cost a fortune, of course, but it was worth every penny. He looked at me, a curious, almost condescending expression on his face. And you? Still in the military? The same question, the same veiled judgment. I nodded, my response clipped. Yes, still there. Ethan laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of any genuine warmth or humor. You want a kind, Art. Dad's right. You could be doing so much more, building something, leading a company, but you choose to stay there in the background. Why? Do you enjoy the hero complex, the quiet martyrdom? I looked at him, my little brother, who used to trail behind me in the garden, begging me to teach him how to throw a baseball, how to skip a stone across the pond. Now, he viewed me as a profound failure. I like my work, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. Ethan shrugged, a dismissive gesture. Suit yourself. But you know, the world operates on money and power. The military doesn't offer that. If you ever change your mind and decide to join the real world, let me know. I can probably get you a position. Nothing grand, mind you, but enough for a fresh start, a decent salary. I smiled, a tight, almost imperceptible curve of my lips, but a furious storm was raging inside me. I didn't need his position. I didn't need his pity. In one short week, he would see me in my major general's uniform, sitting at the head of a conference table, determining the very future of the multi-billion-dollar contract he and my father were pouring their entire efforts into. But for now, I just nodded. "Thanks," I said, standing. "I have to go. Wishing you all the happiness." As I left his opulent office, the elevator descended with agonizing slowness, and my heart felt heavy, not just because of Ethan's dismissive words, but because the truth was my family was no longer the one I remembered from my childhood. They didn't see me. They didn't want to see me, not the real me, not the one who stood for something beyond wealth and prestige. I stepped out onto the bustling street, took a deep, fortifying breath, and reminded myself a silent mantra: one more week. Everything will change. That evening, I returned to the estate. My parents were entertaining a few friends, affluent business people, powerful acquaintances from their exclusive social circle. I intended to slip upstairs unnoticed, to disappear into the quiet refuge of my old room. But my mother's voice, imbued with forced cheerfulness, called out. "Art, come in and meet everyone," she said. I entered the sprawling living room, where impeccably dressed people were lounging on plush sofas, crystal wine glasses in hand, their laughter light and carefree. My father introduced me, his voice conspicuously lacking any enthusiasm. "This is Art, my eldest son. He serves in the military." A man with a booming laugh, likely one of my father's oldest friends from the financial world, chuckled loudly. "The military? Really? You didn't want to join your dad?" Apex Innovations is crushing the market, making billions. The others chuckled along, as if it were a long-running, amusing joke. I smiled politely, the effort straining my facial muscles. "I enjoy my work," I repeated, my voice even, but they persisted, relentless in their subtle judgment. A woman adorned with glittering pearl earrings added, "Oh, what a shame. With advanced genes, you ought to be a billionaire by now, Art. Think of the potential." My father laughed, sipping his expensive wine, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Exactly. But Art wants to be a lowly soldier. I can't figure out what goes through his head, honestly." The room filled with laughter at my father's dismissive comment, a cascade of polite but cruel amusement. I stood there, each word a small, sharp stone striking me, chipping away at my composure. I wanted to shout, to tell them I was a major general, that I held power and influence they could not fathom, that my service safeguarded their very lives. But I didn't. I simply nodded, excused myself with a polite murmur, and went upstairs, my heart pounding with a mixture of pain and repressed fury. I closed my bedroom door with a quiet click and sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind awhirl. One more week, I told myself. One more week, and they will see. After 3 days in my parents' house, days filled with uncomfortable silences and thinly veiled criticisms, I began to pack for my return to work. Before I departed, my father sought me out, shaking my hand in the foyer, his expression unreadable, his tone even, almost conciliatory. "If you ever change your mind, Art, just call me. Apex Innovations will always have a position for you." I nodded without a word, my gaze unwavering. I did not need his position. I had forged my own path, carved my own destiny, and in precisely 1 week, he would witness the full extent of it. I returned to my apartment near the command center, a modest, functional space that offered a welcome sense of calm and anonymity after the opulence of my parents' mansion. It had white, uncluttered walls, an old, sturdy desk, and a bookshelf laden with classified documents, the tools of my trade. I immediately began reviewing emails and preparing for the upcoming meeting at Apex Innovations. I felt no nervousness. I was long accustomed to high-stakes environments, to boardrooms filled with powerful individuals whose eyes were fixed on me, awaiting a decision that could alter the course of national or international events. But this time was different. This time, I would be facing my father and Ethan, not as a son or brother, but as Major General Arthur Vance, the one who held the power over their most significant project. The day before the meeting, I visited my secure office on the military base. The atmosphere there always had a distinct gravity. The rhythmic clatter of keyboards, the crackle of radio transmissions carrying urgent intelligence, and the focused, almost reverent silence of people who understood that every choice, every line of code, every strategic decision could save or cost millions of lives. A colonel named Peterson, a sharp, dedicated officer from my team, entered carrying a thick stack of documents. "Major General, the final report on Project Orion," he said, placing the heavy folder squarely on my desk. I nodded, scanning the executive summary. "Thank you, Colonel. Anything out of the ordinary I should be aware of?" He shook his head, a slight frown creasing his brow. "No, sir. However, Apex Innovations appears to have some issues with their cost allocation. There are some ambiguous expenses that raise flags." I frowned, pulling the report closer and reading more closely. Ethan was the CFO, responsible for the project's finances. If there were discrepancies, the responsibility was undeniably his. I nodded at Peterson. "Keep this confidential for now. I will address it directly in the meeting." The next morning, I donned my Major General's dress uniform, a deep, resonant blue suit embellished with gleaming insignia on the chest, a constellation of ribbons and medals that told a story of service and sacrifice. I looked at myself in the mirror, feeling the immense weight not just of the fabric, but of my rank and my solemn duty. I was not wearing this for show, not primarily. I wore it because this was me, Arthur Vance, the man who chose this path, who built this life, even when the world and his own family dismissed it. I got into the waiting staff car, and my driver took me to the Apex Innovations headquarters, a shimmering glass skyscraper that pierced the city's heart, catching the morning sun like a beacon. As the car pulled up, I took a deep breath and with a quiet resolve, stepped out. Today, everything would change. I walked into the vast, gleaming main lobby, where the impeccably dressed receptionist regarded me with an unmasked, curious gaze. "Major General Vance, this way, please," a young, efficient assistant said, already waiting, and began escorting me to the boardroom on the very top floor. As we moved, I felt the unmistakable stares of employees, of people who did not know who I was, but instantly recognized the gravity and authority conveyed by the rank on my uniform. They whispered and pointed discreetly, but I paid them no mind. My focus was entirely on my father and Ethan, on how they would react when they saw me enter that room. The boardroom was immense, a cathedral of corporate power, with a long, highly polished ebony table and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the entire city. My father was seated at one end, impeccably dressed in a sharp gray suit, conversing casually with a few senior executives, an air of confident command about him. Ethan sat beside him, reviewing documents on his tablet, looking focused but palpably tense. The chairman of the board, Richard Sterling, stood at the head of the table, commanding the room with his presence. He broke into a warm smile as I entered, stepping forward to shake my hand. Richard was an old acquaintance, someone I had collaborated with during a complex NATO cyber operation years ago, and his eyes were full of genuine respect. "Art, good to see you," he said warmly, his grip firm. I nodded, returning his smile. "Good to see you too, Richard." I took my seat, placing my official folder neatly on the table, and immediately felt the atmosphere in the room shift. My father looked up, his gaze sweeping across the room, and his eyes landed on me. His expression flickered with astonishment, a profound, almost comical disbelief. Then he quickly looked away, as if he simply didn't want to acknowledge my presence, or perhaps what my uniform represented. Ethan glanced at me, frowned deeply in confusion, and then leaned over to whisper something urgently to an executive beside him. I knew precisely what they were thinking. What is Art doing here in a uniform? Probably just some low-level military liaison, an errand boy. I remained silent, composed, simply waiting. Richard stood, tapping the table lightly with a pen to command the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered today to discuss Project Orion, a critical defense contract with the Department of Defense." He began, his voice resonant and commanding. "And I am honored to introduce the representative from the military, the individual who holds the final approval authority for this project." He turned to me, his smile widening, a subtle nod of respect in his eyes. "Major General Arthur J. Vance, Director of Cyber Strategy Integration and Defense Relations, U.S. Army Cyber Command." The room fell completely silent. The hum of the air conditioning, the distant city sounds, even the rustle of papers seemed to cease. I could feel every single pair of eyes on me, invisible lasers boring into my very being. My father looked up, his coffee cup frozen in midair, a look of profound shock distorting his features. Ethan whipped his head around, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with utter disbelief, a mixture of recognition and humiliation dawning on him. The other executives began whispering, some shuffling through their documents frantically, as if to verify that it was truly me, the lowly soldier, sitting before them. I sat up straight, met Richard's gaze directly, and nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I am ready to begin." My father coughed, a dry, choked sound, struggling visibly to regain his composure. "Art," he said, his voice trembling, "you your Major General?" He gestured vaguely at my uniform, as if it were an illusion. I looked directly at him, my gaze calm but firm, unwavering. "Yes, sir." Ethan, still reeling, shook his head, muttering under his breath, "No way." But Richard interjected, his tone decisive, almost protective. "Major General Vance is one of the world's foremost experts in cybersecurity. We are privileged to have him here today, leading this discussion." My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from a strange, overwhelming mix of vindication and profound sorrow. I had waited for this moment, the moment my father and Ethan would realize I was not their lowly soldier, not their failure, but a man of purpose and power. Yet at the same time, a deep sadness washed over me. Why did I have to take this? Why did I have to wear this uniform and sit in this formidable boardroom for them to finally see my worth, to truly see me? The boardroom at Apex Innovations headquarters remained thick with tension as I took control of the meeting, my presence now firmly established at the head of the table. My Major General's dress uniform was immaculate, projecting authority, and my gaze swept across the room. Executives in expensive suits now sat rigid with attention. Assistants took frantic notes, and my father and Ethan, both stunned into a palpable silence, sat like statues. I would not allow personal history, years of neglect, or the recent sting of their disdain to interfere with my duty. Not today. I was Major General Arthur Vance, and my mission was to ensure Project Orion was not merely a billion-dollar contract for Apex, but a flawless, impenetrable cybersecurity system capable of protecting millions of American citizens and critical national infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady, clear, and imbued with the undeniable weight of my position. Project Orion is not simply a technology initiative. It is the cornerstone of our national security. It represents a significant investment of taxpayer dollars and, more importantly, a critical trust placed in Apex Innovations. Every single detail, from the minutiae of the programming code to the comprehensive financial allocations, must be rigorously examined, scrutinized, and perfectly justified. I require Apex Innovations to provide transparent, unambiguous explanations of its security protocols and, particularly, its budget structure. Where shall we begin? My eyes settled on Ethan, unwavering, unblinking. Ethan, my younger brother, who just a week prior had openly mocked me as a soldier playing at being a hero, was now fumbling nervously with his tie, his hands visibly trembling. He glanced desperately at our father, as if pleading for a rescue, a familiar paternal intervention, but Harrison sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the polished table, his hand gripping a pen so tightly his knuckles were white. Major General, Ethan began, his voice unsteady, barely above a whisper. We've optimized the cost structure for maximum efficiency, sir. All expenditures are fully documented and audited. He pushed a stack of meticulously prepared papers toward me across the table, but I could clearly see the tremor in his hands. He was not confident. He was clearly rattled. I picked up the documents, my eyes scanning the dense columns of figures, but my mind was already on the specific inconsistencies Colonel Peterson had identified in his pre-meeting report. The $47 million expenditure for the Singapore subsidiary. I stated, my tone calm but incisive, cutting through the carefully constructed facade. It lacks clear justification within the context of Project Orion. Can you elaborate on its precise purpose and why it falls under this defense contract? I looked at Ethan, not as his brother, but as the stern, authoritative figure who held the fate of this critical project in my hands. The room became so quiet that the faint, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock was suddenly audible, almost deafening. Ethan swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing, shuffling frantically through his papers in a desperate search for a plausible answer. It's an investment in auxiliary research, Major General, he managed to say, his voice thin, utterly lacking conviction. Auxiliary research, I repeated, raising an eyebrow, a subtle challenge in my voice. Do you have a detailed report on the results of this research? Because according to our intelligence, that subsidiary has not conducted any Orion-related research or development in the past 2 years. Its operations appear to be entirely unrelated to this project. I slid another document across the table, a crisp, damning analysis compiled by my highly skilled team at Cyber Command, complete with dates and financial flows. Ethan's face went utterly pale, his composure shattering. A nearby executive coughed awkwardly, attempting to break the suffocating tension that had descended upon the room. My father finally looked up, his eyes darting frantically between me and Ethan, as if unable to process the bewildering, humiliating scene unfolding before him. I did not meet his gaze. I did not want to see disappointment or shame in his eyes. Not now. I was simply performing my duty as I had done for the last 10 years, prioritizing my responsibilities to the nation over my personal emotions. Major General, another executive, Ms. Evelyn Reed, spoke up, her voice cautious, almost pleading. We will review this expenditure immediately and provide a comprehensive report within the stipulated time frame. I am certain it is merely a misunderstanding in the accounting. I nodded, My expression neutral, unyielding. I expect that report within 48 hours. National security has no tolerance for misunderstandings. Misread. I stressed the final word, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath, sensing the absolute finality in my tone. I continued, systematically questioning not only the project's finances, but also its proposed security architecture. I asked the technical team from Apex to present the system's core source code, and within minutes, my trained identified a potential critical weakness in their primary encryption protocol. If an adversary were to exploit this vulnerability, I said, my voice cold as ice, precise and devoid of emotion, the entire network could be compromised in a matter of hours, leading to catastrophic data loss and strategic intelligence leaks. I need a comprehensive remediation plan, including timelines and resource allocation, immediately. This is non-negotiable. The Apex engineers nodded furiously, visibly intimidated, scribbling urgent notes. Ethan sat in stunned silence, his eyes fixed on the table, as if wishing he could simply vanish from the room, from existence itself. My father finally spoke again, his voice strained, as if the words were physically difficult to form, choked with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. Major General, he corrected himself, the title now a stark reality. We will ensure that everything is rectified. Apex Innovations is fully committed to cooperating with the Department of Defense and meeting all requirements. I nodded, meeting his eyes for the first time during the meeting. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, not just shock, but perhaps a nascent understanding. I trust that commitment, Mr. Vance, I said, my tone strictly professional, unyielding. Hearing my father address me as Major General in front of the entire board, in a public setting where he held ultimate authority, filled me with an indescribable, complex mix of confidence, vindication, and a deep, quiet pride. The meeting continued for 3 grueling hours. I conducted it with the unshakable precision and unwavering resolve of someone long accustomed to high command. Every question, every demand, every pointed inquiry was meticulously calculated to ensure Project Orion would meet the highest possible standards, to be truly impenetrable. I was not being vindictive. I did not allow personal feelings or past resentments to cloud my judgment. I was not there to settle a score with my father or Ethan, not primarily. I was there to do what was right, to uphold my duty, just as my father had painstakingly taught me when I was a boy, though he now seemed to have profoundly forgotten his own cherished principles. When the meeting finally concluded, the executives stood, approaching me one by one, shaking my hand with palpable respect. Their expressions transformed from skepticism to awe. One whispered to another, just loud enough for me to hear, I had no idea Vance's son was a major general. That was incredibly impressive. I heard it, but did not react outwardly. I gathered my documents, preparing to depart, when Richard Sterling, the chairman of the board, approached me, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. You handled that brilliantly, Art, he said warmly, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. I always knew you were destined for great things, even if others failed to see it. I managed a small, tired smile at him. But inwardly, all I wanted was to leave that room, to escape the lingering stares and the uncomfortable whispers. My father and Ethan did not leave right away. They lingered, their postures uncertain, as if waiting for something from me. I knew they wanted to speak with me, but I wasn't sure I was ready. I stepped out into the grand hallway, the cool air from the high windows a welcome relief against my flushed skin. An assistant hurried after me, offering a chilled glass of water. Major General, Mr. Sterling invites you to his private office for a further discussion, she said, her voice respectful. I nodded, aware that this was not just about work, not anymore. It was a confrontation with my family, one I had postponed for far too long, one that demanded to be faced. Richard's private office was at the very corner of the building, a panoramic space with expansive windows that offered an even more breathtaking view of the city skyline, now bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. When I walked in, my father, Ethan, and even my mother were already there, seated on a plush leather sofa, their faces etched with a mixture of shock, sorrow, and raw emotion. Richard stood behind his large mahogany desk and gave a small, understanding smile. "I will let you have a family moment," he said softly, before leaving and quietly closing the heavy door behind him, leaving us in a tense, echoing silence. The room fell silent once more, a profound, heavy quiet. I stood there, still in my immaculate uniform, feeling the immense weight of the moment, the culmination of years of misunderstanding. My father looked at me, his eyes a complex mixture of shock, shame, and perhaps a dawning realization. My mother sat on the sofa, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red, as if she had been crying for some time. Ethan stood by the window, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, avoiding my gaze, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Art," my father began, his voice trembling barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell us any of this?" He gestured vaguely toward my uniform, at the gleaming insignia on my chest, as if they had suddenly materialized. I looked directly at him, the accumulated hurt from the past days, the past decade, welling up, but I kept my voice even, controlled. "I did, Dad. I sent invitations to my promotion ceremonies. I emailed about Operation Aegis Shield and the NATO medal. I sent photos when I was honored, when I reached milestones that were important to me. No one ever replied. No one ever asked. You never wanted to know." My mother began to sob, a heart-wrenching sound, covering her mouth with a trembling hand, her body shaking. "Artie, I had no idea," she choked out, her voice raw with grief. "I truly thought you were just doing administrative work in the military, something simple. I didn't understand what it was you did, the importance of it, the danger you faced." Her voice cracked, and my heart, despite itself, ached for her genuine regret. I wanted to go to her, to hug her, and tell her it was all right, that I forgave her, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, looking at her, and my father, at Ethan, letting the truth hang in the air. Ethan finally spoke, his voice quiet but sincere, stripped of all its usual arrogance. "Art, I mean, Major General," he corrected himself, the title now a mark of genuine respect, not a perfunctory formality. "I was wrong. I mocked you. I thought you weren't good enough, that you were wasting your life. You deserve respect. You've earned it 1,000 times over." I looked at him, seeing the genuine shame and remorse in his eyes. Part of me, the part that remembered our childhood bond, wanted to forgive him immediately, to go back to the days when we were close brothers, partners in mischief. But another part of me, the part that bore the quiet wounds of years of being ignored and belittled, was still cautious. My father, Harrison, finally stood and took a hesitant step toward me. "Art," he said, his voice thick with emotion, heavy with regret. "I thought you needed my guidance, that you were naive and wasting your immense potential. I was wrong, terribly wrong." He paused, his gaze fixed on my face, as if searching for the right words, for a way to bridge the chasm. "I'm proud of you, son. Truly proud." It was the first time in 10 years he had said that, the first time his pride felt genuine, unburdened by conditions. I looked at him, feeling a flicker of warmth, a fragile hope, mixed with a deep sadness. "I just wanted to be respected for the path I chose," I said quietly, my voice raw with emotion. "Not because I rejected yours." My father nodded slowly, his eyes misty, as if he were replaying the past years, the missed opportunities, the unspoken words in his mind. "You're right," he said softly, his voice full of regret. "I didn't see you, Art. I was blind. I'm so sorry." I did not reply. I just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his words, and turned away, my heart still heavy, but a fraction lighter than before. I had not come here to win or to make them feel guilty. I just wanted them to see me, to truly see me, not through the distorting lens of inherited wealth or fleeting fame, but for who I was, for what I had accomplished. I left the office and stepped back into the summer hallway. The warm sunlight pouring through the windows felt like a benediction on my face. A week ago, I was the lowly soldier. Today, I was Major General Arthur Vance, the man who had silenced a boardroom. But deep down, beneath the uniform and the titles, I was still just Art, the son and the brother, forever hoping that one day his family would truly understand. I returned to my apartment near the command center, where the small, familiar space offered a profound sense of calm after the emotional storm. I removed my uniform, carefully hanging it on the rack, and felt its immense weight physically lift from my shoulders, though the weight in my heart remained, a persistent ache. At my desk, I opened my laptop and reviewed an email from Colonel Peterson. The latest intelligence on Project Orion confirmed my suspicions. Ethan's cost structure had significant flaws. It wasn't outright fraud, but it was undoubtedly poor management, a series of questionable decisions that bordered on negligence. I composed a concise, professional email to Richard Sterling, the chairman of Apex Innovations, recommending they rectify the issues before official intervention from the Department of Defense became necessary. "This does not appear to be intentional," I wrote, choosing my words carefully, "but it represents a significant vulnerability that requires immediate and comprehensive correction to ensure national security." I hit send, feeling a measure of relief in doing the right thing. Not exposing my brother publicly, but giving him a clear, firm opportunity to correct his mistakes and learn from them. The following days were a deep dive back into my demanding work at Cyber Command, a world of intricate code, highly classified briefings, and complex strategies to defend the nation's digital infrastructure against an ever-evolving array of threats. But thoughts of my family persisted, a quiet hum in the background of my consciousness. I thought of my mother's tear-streaked face in Richard's office, her raw, honest regret. I thought of my father's trembling voice as he apologized, his admission of being wrong. And I thought of Ethan, my once close brother, now facing the tangible consequences of his project's shortcomings, consequences that I had mercifully softened. A week after the meeting, I received an email from Ethan. The subject line was simply thanks. I opened it and read each line with a strange, complicated mix of emotions. "Art," he wrote, "I have reviewed the entire cost structure for Orion, as you suggested. There are things I didn't manage well, and I'm in the painful process of fixing them. Thank you for not making a public issue, for giving me a chance to correct my errors internally. I was wrong to underestimate you, profoundly so. If you have some free time, I'd like to meet up. Just the two of us, as brothers, not as a general and a CFO." I reread the email, a small spark of warmth igniting in my chest, a fragile hope. I replied briefly, "Good. I'm free this weekend. Let's meet at the old coffee shop." It was a small, unassuming cafe in the suburbs where we had spent countless hours as kids, sharing milkshakes and talking about our boundless dreams, a neutral territory devoid of corporate pressures or military formality. Ethan agreed immediately. I put my phone down, feeling a flicker of hope, though I remained cautiously optimistic. I wanted to believe we could reconnect, but I knew the path forward would not be simple or without its continued challenges. That weekend, I arrive at the cafe wearing a simple, comfortable shirt and jeans. No uniform, no insignia, no outward display of rank or authority. I wanted to meet Ethan not as a major general, but as his brother, as Art. He was already there, sitting in our old corner booth with a latte in front of him, staring out the window. When he saw me, he stood and smiled, the first genuine, unburdened smile I'd seen from him in years. Art, he said softly, his voice holding a new humility. Thanks for coming. We sat and talked for over an hour. At first, the conversation was superficial. Work, Sophia, the weather, safe topics. But then, Ethan took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly, and looked me directly in the eye, his gaze steady and sincere. Art, I am so sorry, he said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. I thought you weren't good enough, that you were just a lowly soldier. I was wrong, so wrong. What you do, what you've achieved. I had no idea of the scale, the importance. I let my own arrogance and our family's expectations blind me. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I saw my little brother, truly saw the regret in his expression. It's okay, Ethan, I said, my voice softer than I intended. I don't need you to be proud of me. I just want you to respect the path I chose, to see its value. He nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. I've corrected the cost plan for Orion meticulously, he said, changing the subject slightly. And Richard says it's much stronger now. And I learned a valuable lesson from you. Not just about finances, but about responsibility and integrity, about looking beyond the surface. I smiled, feeling a profound sense of relief. Good. You're a smart guy, Ethan. You'll do better. We continued to talk, reminiscing about old times, silly arguments, and the ambitious dreams we once shared as boys, dreams that had taken us on such vastly different paths. As we left the cafe, I felt that a significant part of the chasm between us had finally closed. Not completely, not yet, but enough to make me believe that one day we could be true brothers again, bound by understanding and respect. A few days later, I received another email, this time from my father. It was an internal memorandum from Apex Innovations, sent to all employees, but he had copied me directly. Dear Apex Innovations team. It began, its tone formal, but its content deeply personal. I want to share something I have recently come to understand. My son, Major General Arthur Vance, is an exceptional man, a brilliant leader in the critical field of cybersecurity, and a source of immense pride for our family. I underestimated him, and for that, I sincerely apologize. We are fortunate to have him providing critical oversight for Project Orion, and I hope we can all learn from his unwavering integrity and dedication. I read the email, my eyes stinging, a lump forming in my throat. My father had not just apologized to me privately. He had publicly acknowledged his mistake to hundreds of his employees, to his entire company. It was something I never, in my wildest dreams, imagined he would do. I called him. He answered on the first ring, his voice warmer, more genuinely affectionate than I could ever remember. Art, he said, did you get the email? I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Yes, Dad. Thank you. It means a lot. He was quiet for a moment, then said, his voice thick with emotion, I was wrong, son. I didn't see you. I want to make it right. When you're free, please come home. Your mom misses you terribly. I smiled, a great burden lifting from me, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I'll come, Dad. Soon. 6 months later, I returned to my parents' estate, not for a wedding, not for a confrontation, but simply to visit. The atmosphere was profoundly transformed. As I walked in, my mother rushed to embrace me, her eyes sparkling with genuine joy, her hug firm and loving. "Artie," she said, her voice full of happiness, "I made your favorite apple pie, just for you." I laughed a real, unburdened laugh and hugged her back, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of her perfume, a smell that finally felt like home again. My father stood behind her and shook my hand, this time with a warmth that was not forced, a genuine connection. "It's good to see you, Art," he said, his smile reaching his eyes. Ethan was there as well, with Sophia, now a cherished part of the family. He clapped me on the shoulder, grinning widely. "No meetings this time, Art. Just family. And maybe some pie." We sat in the living room, where a small but profoundly significant change immediately caught my attention. On the wall, proudly displayed next to my father's gleaming Fortune magazine cover and Ethan's framed MBA diploma, was a new frame. It was the photograph of me in uniform, shaking hands with the NATO general, receiving my medal. I stared at it, a warmth spreading through my chest, a quiet, profound sense of belonging. "Who hung this up?" I asked softly, my voice barely a whisper. My mother smiled, her eyes brimming with love. "Your father did, Artie. He said it was time our home was proud of all our children, of all our achievements." That dinner was the first in years where I truly felt at home, truly part of the family, not an outsider observing from a distant table. We talked and laughed freely, and for the first time, they asked about my work. My mother was genuinely curious about a new military AI training program I was overseeing. "Is it like in the science fiction movies, Artie?" she asked, her eyes wide with unfeigned interest. I laughed and explained it in simple terms, knowing she only partially understood, but nodded along enthusiastically, eager to engage. My father asked about Operation Aegis Shield, and for the first time, he listened, truly listened, asking intelligent follow-up questions, his expression thoughtful. Ethan mentioned that he had implemented one of my specific encryption suggestions on a new Apex Innovations project. "It worked even better than I anticipated," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "You're a genius, Art." As dinner concluded, I stepped out into the garden, gazing at the swimming pool as it shimmered under the soft moonlight, reflecting the stars. My mother joined me a few moments later, carrying a jacket. "It's getting chilly, Artie," she said, her voice gentle, draping it over my shoulders. I smiled and thanked her, pulling the jacket closer. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice soft but certain, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Not because you're a major general, not because of your rank or your accomplishments, but because you're my son and you chose a path of integrity and purpose." I looked at her, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I know, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." I felt a sense of peace, a quiet completeness I hadn't thought possible. My family was not perfect. We had lost years to misunderstanding, to pride and stubbornness, and the scars remained, faint but present. But at least we were trying. And perhaps, finally, that was what mattered most. A few days later, I was back in the familiar, comforting rhythm of my life as a major general. As I unpacked my suitcase in my office, I found a handwritten letter tucked neatly inside the pocket of my uniform. It was in my mother's elegant script. "Artie," she wrote, "I am so proud of you. Not because you're a major general, but because you are my son. I love you." I smiled, a genuine, warm smile, placing the letter on my desk beside my NATO medal. In that moment, I felt a powerful, enduring spark of hope. My family was finally learning to see me, truly see me, and I, in turn, was learning to let go of the past and embrace the brighter days ahead.